At my father's birthday party, the name tag waiting for me did not just have my name, it had a label. The Letdown. My stepmother chuckled when she saw it. And honestly, she probably meant it. So, I got to my feet, tapped my glass to grab everyone's attention, and said, "I'd like to propose a toast to the last time you'll ever see me." My father coughed in surprise, but the real shock set in when I turned on my heel, walked out the door, and left for good. I am 29 years old, male, and if you ask my father to describe me, he would likely tell you I was his biggest letdown. Not because I broke the law, not because I was unemployed, and certainly not because I had done anything truly terrible. No, his disappointment stemmed from something far simpler. I chose to live my life on my own terms instead of following the blueprint he had laid out for me. My father, James, has always been a man who thrives on control. He cares deeply about how things appear to the outside world, and to him, family loyalty is sacred, so long as that loyalty revolves around him and his interests. When my parents divorced, I was 7 years old. On the surface, the split seemed civil, no dramatic fights or messy battles. But my father wasted no time moving on. Within a year, he had married Margaret, a woman who brought 2 kids from her previous marriage into our lives, William and Emma. That was when the shift began. In the beginning, I made a real effort. I was just a kid who wanted to see her father happy. Margaret was friendly in that overly rehearsed, too sweet kind of way. The kind of person who turned everything into a show, all smiles and exaggerated warmth in public. She would wrap me in hugs that lasted just a little too long and say things like, "I just know we're going to be best friends." But behind closed doors, her real priorities became clear. Her own children always came first. My father, once a steady and present force in my life, suddenly had a new focus. He went from being my dad to being their dad. At first, it was subtle. He would miss my soccer games but show up front and center for Williams. He would forget to pick me up from school, yet never once failed to be on time for Emma's dance recitals. Then, over time, the favoritism escalated. By the time I was 15, I was expected to babysit them, handle chores they never had to touch, and play the role of a perfect big brother while they got away with everything. If I ever voiced my frustration, my father would sigh, like I was draining the life out of him, and tell me, "They need more attention. You are older. Be mature." Margaret, on the other hand, never bothered with sugarcoating. She would just call me selfish. The final straw? My father emptied the savings account my mother had painstakingly set aside for me, money meant for my college education. My mother fought like hell in court to get it back, but by then, the damage had been done. I was furious. My last year of high school, I barely spoke to him, and when I left for college, which I paid for entirely on my own, I only came home for the occasional holiday. As the years passed, our relationship remained fractured. I still received invitations to family events, but they always felt like obligations rather than genuine attempts to reconnect. It was clear that, to my father and Margaret, I was nothing more than the difficult child who refused to go along with their perfect little family narrative. William and Emma, on the other hand, could do no wrong. They were the golden children. Which brings me to my father's birthday party. Margaret had planned an extravagant event for him, one of those massive, over-the-top parties where they invite every single person they have ever met. I had not intended to attend, but my aunt, the only family member who had ever truly been in my corner, talked me into it. "Just drop by for a little while," she urged. "Maybe things are different now." Spoiler alert, they were not. The second I walked through the door, I felt it, that old, familiar discomfort. People I had not seen in years were there, but instead of warm welcomes, I received polite nods. Conversations flowed all around me, but I was never really included. I spotted my father across the room, laughing with some old friends, but when he saw me, his smile faltered for the briefest moment, like he had not expected me to actually show up. I was already regretting my decision when my eyes landed on a small table near the entrance. It held name tags. This was something Margaret had done before at past events, claiming it helped guests mingle. It was one of her signature touches. Most of the tags were unremarkable: Uncle Mark, Cousin Rachel, Neighbor Tom. But then I saw mine. I froze. My name was there, but underneath it, in smaller letters, someone had scrawled 2 words. The Letdown. I picked it up, staring at it, my stomach twisting into knots. And from across the room, I heard it. Margaret's familiar, amused laughter. She was watching me, a wineglass in hand, that ever-present smug smirk stretched across her face. I clenched the name tag between my fingers, heat crawling up my spine. If she thought this would break me, she was in for a surprise. For a few seconds, I just stood there, gripping the tag, my mind processing what I was looking at. Maybe, I thought, this was some kind of twisted joke, an awful attempt at humor, a cousin trying to be funny, or some kind of mix-up. But then I heard her laugh again. And when I looked up, there she was, standing near the bar, sipping her wine with the air of someone who had one. Our eyes met, and that smirk of hers only grew. My pulse pounded in my ears. By now, a few people had noticed me standing there, their eyes flickering in my direction. No one said a word, but I could feel the unspoken pressure. I could almost hear their thoughts. Do not make a scene. Slowly, I set the name tag back down on the table, smoothing it out so it lined up perfectly with the others. For a second, I nearly laughed. Of course, she would pull something like this. This was classic Margaret. Not an outright insult. Nothing direct enough for people to immediately call her out. Just subtle enough that if I reacted, I would be the problem. I should have known the second I walked through the door that something like this was coming. A gentle hand rested on my shoulder, and I turned to find my aunt, my only real ally in this family. Her face was tight, her brows furrowed as her gaze flickered from the name tag to Margaret. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. I forced a tight smile. "Yeah," I lied. "I am fine." But I was not. I was drained. Not just tired, not just frustrated. This was a deep, bone-weary kind of exhaustion. The kind that settles in when something happens not for the first time, not even for the worst time, but as just another entry in a long, relentless pattern. This was Margaret's specialty. A constant, quiet reminder of my place in this family. I should have walked out, but something in me refused. Not this time. So, instead, I took a slow breath, squared my shoulders, and did something that I knew would throw her off. I smiled. A real, effortless smile, as if nothing had happened at all. Then I plucked a glass of champagne from a passing server, tapped my nail against the rim with a soft clink, and turned toward the room. If Margaret wanted a show, I would give her one. I lifted my glass just slightly, catching the subtle shift in the air as a few heads turned my way. It was not a scene. Not yet. But that tiny sound, that barely there clink, was just enough to pull a few eyes toward me. Just enough to make Margaret hesitate. She paused for the briefest moment before taking another slow sip of her wine, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to figure out what I was doing. I let the silence stretch, drawing it out just a second too long, like I was on the verge of making a toast, before giving a small shake of my head and turning away, making my way deeper into the party. I would not give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Not yet. The party was exactly what I expected, crowded, overdone, and polished within an inch of its life. Expensive catering, carefully curated decorations, everything meticulously staged. Margaret never did anything halfway because, to her, life was not just about existing, it was about performing. This was not just a birthday party for my father. This was a spectacle. A declaration to the world about how wonderful, how successful, how adored she and my father were. About how perfect their family was. Their family. Not me. William and Emma were already the center of attention, effortlessly holding court in the middle of the room. A small circle of relatives hung on Emma's every word as she gushed about her upcoming wedding. "And, of course, Dad is paying for everything," she said, flashing a wide smile as she twisted the massive diamond on her finger. "We wanted something tasteful, you know? A real elegant wedding, not one of those tacky Pinterest disasters." I nearly laughed out loud. Emma had always been like this, polished, rehearsed, self-absorbed just enough to ensure the world revolved around her without making it too obvious. William, meanwhile, leaned against the bar, nodding along as a few of my father's old friends congratulated him on his new job, when I was certain he had not actually earned. William had never worked for anything in his life. Every opportunity had been handed to him, every mistake quietly erased. I felt a flicker of temptation, just for a moment, to walk over and insert myself into the conversation, just to watch them squirm. But before I could, I heard my father's voice. "Ah," he said, and when I turned, he was already approaching, a drink in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "I did not think you were going to come." I smiled. A tight, controlled smile. "Would not miss it." He nodded, glancing around the room as if searching for something before his gaze landed back on me. "You have been keeping busy, I hear." And there it was. That polite, deliberate way he avoided asking anything real. I nodded. "Yeah, work has been good. I bought a house last year." His brows lifted slightly. "A house?" "Yep." He took a sip of his drink and said nothing else. That was my father. He hated when I succeeded, when I did anything that made it impossible for him to see me as the failure he had always convinced himself I would be. Every time I accomplished something on my own, without his money, without his help, it chipped away at the version of me he had crafted in his mind. The one he could shake his head at. The one he could speak about in pitying tones when people asked about me. I could feel him searching for something to say, something subtle, some carefully measured dig to remind me of my place. But before he could, Margaret's voice sliced through the moment like a knife. "Well," she said, stepping up beside him, her smile sharp and gleaming. "At least he finally did something responsible." And just like that, the heat rose in my chest again. I turned to her. She was beaming at me, so pleasant, so sweet. But I knew that look. I had seen it 100 times before. Margaret had a gift for cutting people down while making it seem like she was just being friendly. If you reacted, you were the problem. If you got upset, you were too sensitive. It was always just a joke. I should have walked away. I should have let it slide. But I did not. Because something about this night, about this entire event, felt different. Maybe it was the name tag. Maybe it was the fact that my father had barely spoken to me before looking for a way to brush me off. Maybe it was the way the room was filled with people who had never really been my family. Whatever it was, I had reached my limit. I turned to Margaret, tilting my head slightly, my voice light and casual. "You know," I said, "I was going to let it go." I paused, letting the words settle. But I have to ask, whose idea was the name tag? For just a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. "Oh, come on," she said, laughing. "You always take things so personally." She waved a hand like it was nothing. "It was funny." I nodded. "Right. Hilarious." Margaret gave a casual shrug, sipping her wine. "You know, if you spent less time being angry all the time, maybe you'd be." I held up a finger, cutting her off. "Actually," I said, my voice calm, "I think you're right." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "About what?" "About making a joke." I turned slightly, raising my glass. "Because now that I think about it, I have one too." She blinked, momentarily thrown off. My father shifted beside her, suddenly uncomfortable. And then, I smiled. "Slow. Easy. I'd like to make a toast." The shift in the room was almost imperceptible at first, just a few murmurs dying down as people turned toward me, intrigued. Because everyone loves a toast. Especially an unexpected one. I felt my father tense beside me. Margaret let out a small, dismissive laugh, shifting her weight like she could wave this away. "Oh, come on. You don't have to." I lifted a hand, still smiling. "No, really. I insist." More heads turned. Conversations quieted. A few guests grabbed their drinks, ready to indulge in what they assumed would be a light-hearted moment. They had no idea. Margaret's smile stayed in place, but I saw the edges of it tighten. She was still holding on to the idea that I was the same person she had always known, the one who swallowed every insult, let every little jab roll off, never fought back. But my father? He knew better. For the first time that night, he was looking at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. I let the silence stretch just a little longer, building the anticipation. Then, finally, I lifted my glass. To my father, I began, voice light, almost casual. And to Margaret, of course. A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. Because without them, I continued, I don't think I would have learned one of the most valuable lessons of my life. I took a slow sip of my champagne. Margaret let out a small, breathy laugh, the kind meant to make a moment feel less tense. Oh boy, here we go. More chuckles. They thought this was banter. They thought I was about to make fun of myself, smooth things over like I always did. I smiled. No, really. I mean it. I glanced at my father. Because I think we learn the most from the people who challenge us, don't you? His grip tightened around his drink. His throat bobbed slightly as he swallowed. He did not like where this was going. Dad, you always told me that family is supposed to build each other up, I continued. That we should support one another. Celebrate each other's successes. The room was silent now. Margaret's fingers had curled so tightly around the stem of her wine glass that I half expected it to snap. And I used to believe that, I said, setting my glass down on the table beside me. I really did. But then, somewhere along the way, I realized something. I let the words settle. Margaret's smile did not waver, but her knuckles had gone white. Emma glanced toward my father, waiting to take her cue from him. William, on the other hand, smirked like this was all just entertainment. I exhaled slowly. I realized that, for some people, support only exists when you fit into the version of yourself they want you to be. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. that as long as you play the role they wrote for you, the golden child, the black sheep, they will keep you exactly where they need you. And if you step outside that role, I gave a small shake of my head. Well, that's when they show you how they really feel. A hush fell over the room, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Margaret looked like she wanted to interject, but she held back. My father's jaw was tight. I pressed on. I used to think that if I just proved myself, if I worked hard enough, if I was successful enough, if I played by the rules, you'd see me differently. My voice softened, but my resolve did not. But I get it now. Margaret opened her mouth, probably to shut me down, but I did not give her the chance. I turned back to my father. Because at the end of the day, I was never supposed to succeed. Was I? For the briefest moment, something flickered across his face. I let that silence linger, just long enough to let the weight of my words settle. Then, I exhaled, rolling my shoulders back. But I did. My voice was steady, certain. I built something for myself. I made a life that has nothing to do with this family. And let me tell you, I let my eyes sweep over the room, meeting every gaze that dared to hold mine. It has been the most peaceful, fulfilling thing I have ever done. I could see it now, the curiosity, the doubt, the questions forming behind polite, frozen smiles. Because they had no idea. They had spent years believing the version of me that Margaret and my father had carefully crafted. The version they needed me to be. Margaret forced out another laugh, the sound brittle now, trying to regain control of the moment. Oh, come on, she scoffed. This is ridiculous. It's just a name tag. I turned my gaze to her. You're right, I said smoothly. It is. I let the words hang in the air before adding, but it is also a pattern. I tilted my head slightly. A lifetime of moments just like this. Her face was a perfect mask of composure, but her knuckles were still white. Little jokes. Little reminders that no matter what I did, no matter how much I achieved, I would always be a disappointment in their eyes. My father finally cleared his throat, stepping forward just slightly. That's enough. I met his gaze head on. Oh, I agree. I let the words settle, my voice unwavering. It is enough. And then, before anyone could fully process what was happening, I picked up my glass again, raised it slightly. Let the weight of my next words settle over the room. To the last time you'll ever see me. Silence. Not just any silence, the kind that swallows a room whole. My father stiffened. Margaret's jaw actually dropped before she caught herself, snapping it shut. Somewhere in the back, someone muttered, "Wait, what?" And then, without another word, I set my glass down, turned, and walked toward the door. I could feel them watching me. Could feel the panic creeping in. Because this time was different. This was not one of those fights that would blow over. There would be no awkward apologies, no sweeping things under the rug like nothing had happened. I took one last glance back before stepping through the door, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking toward something. Toward freedom. Toward peace. Toward the life I had been building outside of all this. The drama, the expectations, the constant battle to prove myself to people who never really saw me. Outside, the night air was crisp, cool against my skin. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs, letting it settle inside me. It was over. I had cut ties in the way I should have years ago. No more pretending. No more trying to win approval from people who only valued me when I fit into their carefully curated image of what I was supposed to be. I drove home in silence that night, each passing mile lifting something off my shoulders. And yet, even as I sat in my quiet living room later that evening, there was a tiny voice in the back of my mind. Had I gone too far? Had I been too harsh? Was I really justified in burning it all down like that? The next few days blurred together, calls I ignored, texts I refused to open. I knew social media was filled with the fallout, but I did not look. I had walked out on my father's birthday celebration. Humiliated him. Humiliated Margaret, his wife, my stepmother, the woman who had spent years making it clear that I was an inconvenience in her perfect world. The family group chat was in chaos. Message after message, everyone trying to figure out what to say, how to react. But I stayed silent, unwilling to face whatever confrontation was waiting for me. Then, finally, a message from my aunt, the only person who had ever truly understood me. Are you okay? I stared at the screen, unsure how to answer. Because the truth was, I was okay. Better than I had been in years. But I was also unsure. I told her I needed time. She did not press. The next morning, my father called. His voice was steady, but I knew that tone well, the one that always carried just a hint of disappointment, like no matter what I did, I was always falling short. Where are you? I'm at home. I did not hesitate. I'm not coming back. Silence. A long, heavy pause. You can't just leave like this, he finally said. This family, we have to stick together. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone just a little tighter. Not if sticking together means pretending to be someone I'm not. My voice did not waver. Not anymore. That was the last time we spoke. Weeks passed. I stayed away from every family event, weddings, birthdays, whatever other obligations they tried to pull me into. Most of them fell in line behind my father and Margaret, choosing their side, pretending like nothing had happened. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine, how my father was hurt, how Margaret was furious, how my brother and sister were so disappointed that I had made a scene. But none of it bothered me, because for the first time in my life, I was free. I was still living, still thriving. And while I was not exactly happy about cutting them all off, there was a peace in it, a peace I had never known before. I have not spoken to anyone in my family since that night. And now, here I am, asking, was I the asshole for walking out like that? For making the toast? For cutting them off completely? Did I take it too far? Or was this long overdue? I know I will never get my father's approval. I know I will never be the daughter he wanted. But maybe, for the first time in my life, I have finally figured out that I do not need to be.